Most people on Earth today, and in fact most people who have lived throughout history, have believed in free will. This is to believe that we are the thinker of our thoughts, or the decider of our actions. To believe in free will is to believe that under the exact circumstances of our past, knowing fully well what you did do, that you could have done otherwise. This is untrue. Free will is an illusion. Let me explain why. Imagine a man, a fairly average man, who is an upstanding citizen and a hard worker, a man who loves his wife. Now imagine that this man comes home from work one day, only to find his wife and another man in bed together. The husband, as you can imagine being overcome with anger, is driven to kill his wife and the other man in bed. We no doubt have sympathy with the man and what he felt under those circumstances, and disregarding whether he was justified in what he had done, or whether or not it was a good decision to kill his wife and her partner. Was the man free to do otherwise? Under those exact same circumstances, with the same brain and the same life experience, was he free to do otherwise? I'd like to address the question of free will first from a neuroscientific perspective, and second from a philosophical perspective. If you understand anything about psychology, all thoughts, intentions, and actions first arise in the brain. Where do these thoughts come from? Why are they created? All of these thoughts and intentions arise out of existing structures within the brain. So what in fact does make us free? Every thought, intention, and decision arising in consciousness is created by the interplay between the brain and the environment. Stated in another way, the brain reacts to the events occurring around you. This brain, being the ultimate source of who you are and the thoughts that you have on a day-to-day basis, is formed through two things. One, your genetics, passed down to you by your mother and your father, under which you have no control. And two, your life experience, which you also have no control over. This, in effect, means that you have no control over who you are. Your genetics and your life experience forms the person that is you in the current moment. And in any given situation, this brain, whose structure you have no control over, is simply reacting to the events going on outside of your body. This makes it clear that one does not have free will. But is this not enough for you? If you decide you need more evidence of the illusion of free will, here it is. Neuroscientists in the lab have tested the difference in time between the brain's decision to take an action and our conscious awareness of it. This difference in time has been shown to be about 10 seconds. This effectively means that your brain has made a decision to take an action before you are even aware of your decision to take that action. This makes it even clearer that free will is in fact an illusion. Now I know what some of you may be thinking. What if, in reality, we are not entirely physical? What if, in fact, we are not just a brain? What if we are a soul, and therefore capable of making free decisions without the constraints of biology and physics? Here I get to the philosophical perspective. If you pay close attention to your conscious experience, you will realize that thoughts, intentions, and feelings are merely arising in consciousness. In order for there to be free will, one must be aware of their thoughts before one thinks their thoughts. This may be confusing to you. If your thoughts are merely arising in consciousness, then you are not really choosing them. In order for you to choose your next thought or choose your next action, you must be aware of the action before it takes place. You must be aware of the thoughts that are possible for you to think before you think them. This is impossible. The idea that you have chosen the next thought that arises in your consciousness is impossible, even outside of the lens and constraints of neuroscience. This makes it conclusively untrue that we are free to choose our next action. Therefore, even if a human being is not just a brain and all the relevant biology that goes into who you are and what you are, human beings can still not have free will because we cannot choose our next thought. Our next thought simply arises, and we take possession of that next thought as it arises in consciousness, thus creating the illusion that we have free will, and the belief that has pervaded throughout all of history. Other people who know a thing or two about physics may have another objection to the argument I'm putting forth. The most accurate theory that physics has ever produced is the theory of quantum mechanics. This theory dictates that all of the smallest particles, the fundamental particles that make up our universe, are not actually deterministic, but rather probabilistic. This means that many of the events that occur on the smallest scales of our universe, in fact, occur by chance. This, thus destroying the idea of determinism, is interpreted by some that free will is actually possible.
Drove Einstein crazy. He said, God does not play dice, referring to this. I mean, he wished that we could compress our theory of quantum mechanics further so that we could really figure out where these particles were going to be. But maybe the reason why we haven't been able to compress quantum mechanics further is because fundamentally it's random. Fundamentally, new information is being generated every time a quantum event like that occurs. In that case, it could be these quantum measurements which are driving up the entropy of the universe. They are creating new information all of the time, and that means the disorder in our universe must go up. This is what we observe as the second law of thermodynamics. You know, we often think about the second law as a curse, as though everything which is ordered is going towards disorder. But maybe, it's only in a universe where this law is obeyed that the truly unexpected can occur, that the future can be actually undetermined. For us really to have free will, we need the second law of thermodynamics. Now, you might think that these quantum events are too small to have any meaningful impact on the evolution of the universe, but that is not true. And that's because there are physical systems which are so dependent, so sensitive to the initial conditions that any tiny change will end up making a big difference later down the track. That's called chaos, but it's also known as the butterfly effect. So you and I could be such physical systems, chaotic systems, and our free will could come from quantum events in our brains.
This is simply a misinterpretation of the ideas laid forth in quantum mechanics. This merely means that many of the events that occur in our universe are random. Randomness does not mean that we have free will. Objects in the universe are either probabilistic, relativistic, or deterministic, none of which allow for the idea of free will. Let me quickly reiterate, because I realize this may be confusing to many people who are unfamiliar with the ideas of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics means that small events in the universe are basically probabilistic, meaning random with certain probabilities that one thing will happen over the other. Randomness, when applied to the brain, simply means that our actions, our thoughts, whatever happens in the brain, at some level are random. Randomness in thought and action does not allow the idea of free will. The idea that free will does not actually exist has stunning implications on how we view the criminal justice system, how we view other people acting in the world, and even how we view ourselves. The implications are immense and extraordinary, but that is perhaps too much to get to in one video. Free will is an illusion. Hello, this is Kendall Butler. I hope you enjoyed that video. Links to the video in which Veritasium makes a mistake about free will, Sam Harris's speech on free will, Sam Harris's book called Free Will, and the relevant article on neuroscience are below. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Have a nice day.
The first problem is that we live in a world of cause and effect, and there's no way of thinking about cause and effect that allows us to say that the buck stops here. Okay, the buck never stops. Okay, either our wills are determined by prior causes, a long chain of prior causes, and we're not responsible for them, or they're the product of chance, and we're not responsible for them, or there's some combination of chance and determinism. But no combination seems to give you the free will that people cherish. Now, you could consider a generic serial killer. Okay, his choice to commit his last murder was determined by neurophysiological events in his brain, which were in turn determined by prior causes. Bad genes, the developmental effects of an unhappy childhood, a night of lost sleep because a car alarm was going off down the street. Okay, these events precede any conscious decision to act. So what does it mean to say that this murderer committed his crime of his own free will? Okay, if this statement means anything, it must mean that he could have behaved differently. He could have resisted the impulse to commit the murder, or he could have declined to feel the impulse altogether. And not on the basis of some random influences over which he had no conscious control, but because he was actually the conscious author of his thoughts and actions. Now, the problem is no one has been able to describe a way in which mental and physical events could arise that would make sense of this claim of freedom.